Hello, welcome to this exciting webinar, Big Reads from Small Presses. I'm Donna Seaman, Adult Books Editor at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom an hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom and click on the links. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble accessing these materials, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. You are in listen-only mode, dear audience, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we will pass along all other questions to today's panelists. They will follow up with you after the webinar. Last but not least, Booklist offers closed captioning for all our webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. All right, look at this lineup. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Brian McCarthy, Associate Publisher, Library of America, Emily Powers, Senior Marketing Manager at Beacon Press, Tiffany Gonzalez, Marketing Manager at Astra Publishing House, Claire Kelly, Director of Library and Academic Marketing at 7 Stories Press, Rachel Ferschleiser, Marketing Director at Catapult, Counterpoint, and Soft Skull Press, Ann Rumberger, U.S. Marketing Director at Verso Books, Dan Goldberg, Sales and Marketing Director at Steerforth Press, Janet Joy Wilson, Vice President of Sales at Melville House, and to kick things off, Kelly Coyle-Crivelli, Senior Marketing Manager on the Penguin Random House Library Marketing Team. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Kelly, our first up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Donna, so much. So nice to be with everybody today. I just wanted to kick off and welcome everybody to our webinar with some of our wonderful distribution partners that we are lucky to work with every single day. And just can't wait for you to hear all the great titles they're going to present. And you can obviously, and we encourage you to reach out to anybody on this webinar individually, but if you had questions and you couldn't remember who they were for, you could always channel them through us at library@penguinrandomhouse.com, and we will make sure to get you in touch with the right publisher. Next slide. Just a couple of little reminders before you guys can get onto your great titles. Every month we do a morning book buzz. Our next one is Wednesday, November 2nd. Each month we compile a list of titles in different categories from the Penguin Random House publishers and from our distribution partners as well. It's a fun time to catch up with us every month, see what's coming out next, and to ask any questions. And one other reminder we have is next slide. We'd love for you to join us again, if you haven't before, for our Winter Book and Author Festival that we do in conjunction with Library Journal and School Library Journal. And it's a whole day of great panels, author panels, author talks, title lists, all sorts of great resources to get you through the rest of the year and early spring. So we hope you will join us at our fall and winter festival. And that's all from me today. Have a great presentation, everybody. Good luck. And there's just again where you can follow us on socials to keep up with all these great publishers. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly, for all that useful information. We'll now hear our first title list from Brian McCarthy. Brian is the Associate Publisher of Library of America. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Donna. And thanks also to Grace and Taylor and Kelly and everyone who made today possible. It's always a pleasure to be with librarians. As our name might suggest, we have a special affinity with the work that you do. For those who may not know, Library of America is a nonprofit cultural organization that publishes America's greatest writing in durable and authoritative editions, reasonably priced to reach the widest possible audience. We also provide free resources like our Story of the Week service and an ongoing virtual speaker series called LOA Live to help readers explore this rich living legacy. The first 4 Library of America volumes were published in May of 1982, and this year we've been marking our 40th anniversary. We're best known for our mostly black-jacketed series, some of which you see here, which now includes more than 365 volumes, encompassing a wide range of genres and periods, from classic literary fiction, poetry and drama, to journalism, science fiction, and crime writing, and including essential historical texts from the Pilgrims to the Founding Era to the war in Vietnam and the Civil Rights Movement. More than 11 million copies of Library of America volumes are now in print, and thanks to exacting production standards, including Smythe Stone bindings, high quality rayon cloth, and thin but very tough acid-free paper, they are in virtually the same condition today as when they were first published. I'm very excited today to review a few forthcoming projects, but we'll start with one that actually went on sale just yesterday. Bruce Catton's Army of the Potomac trilogy is a landmark of historical storytelling, one of the most powerful and influential works ever written about the Civil War. And yet for decades, it has been unavailable in print, in full for print readers. This week, Library of America has restored the entirety of this classic to print in a deluxe single volume collector's edition with full color end paper maps and detailed notes in a newly researched chronology of Bruce Catton's life and career by acclaimed Civil War scholar Gary W. Gallagher. Mr. Lincoln's Army, the first book in the trilogy, describes the Army of Potomac's formation as the bulwark of the Union war effort and emerging friction between the Army's commanding general, George McClellan, and President Lincoln as it reaches a crisis in the wake of the deadly battle at Antietam. Glory Road recounts the critical months between the autumn of 1862 and midsummer 1863, including the battles at Fredericksburg, Rappahannock, and Chancellorsville, which set the stage for the costly Union victory at Gettysburg. Catton's retelling of that famous battle and of the story of Lincoln's address at Gettysburg remains unrivaled. And finally, in A Stillness at Appomattox, which won both the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, the Army of the Potomac, now under the driving command of Ulysses S. Grant, finally gains the upper hand against Robert E. Lee, culminating in one of the most vividly drawn accounts of Lee's final surrender. One of the key features of the Library of America series from a collection building or maintaining perspective is that we save you shelf space. Here you can see our new edition next to probably the most ubiquitous earlier edition of the trilogy, the Doubleday set from the 1960s. And on top of economy and convenience, we have fully restored Raphael Palacios's original maps from the edition, reproduced in a gorgeous insert and on the end papers. Barnes & Noble named the volume one of its most anticipated new titles for October, and I'm happy to say it was the subject of a major review in this weekend's edition of the Wall Street Journal. To quote from Barnes & Noble's promotion, "Whether a deeply passionate Civil War nerd or simply curious and looking for a good place to start, you must pick this one up." Since 2016, Library of America has been publishing a collected edition of Ursula K. Le Guin's novels and stories. For those of us who were lucky enough to work with Ursula on the edition before her death in 2018, it was one of the high points of our career. So charming and inspiring was she as a collaborator. The 5 volumes published to date, which you see here, have found an eager audience, especially the 2-volume Hainish novels and stories, which brings together her entire groundbreaking galaxy-spanning saga for the first time. As we conceived the larger edition, which is contemplated to run to 10 volumes when all said and done, there was one volume that clearly meant the most to Ursula, one volume that spoke most directly to her sense of who she was as a writer. For Le Guin, despite all of her fame as an author of science fiction and fantasy, thought of herself first and foremost as a poet. And indeed, both her first and her last published works were poems. So this is the first collected edition of the poetry of one of the most visionary writers of our or any time. Le Guin's poems are, in the words of volume editor Harold Bloom, American Originals. Bloom's involvement in this project was an added blessing, and it constitutes, so far as we are aware at least, his final posthumous publication. As Howell relates in his introduction, he and Ursula became acquainted only in 2017, just months before her death, but he had lived with and admired her poetry for many years, considering her one of the most underrated major American poets of the last century. Many of the poems collected here are from books now long out of print. More than 40 others are collected here for the first time. Readers new to Le Guin's poems will discover that the themes that resonate throughout her fiction find their most refined expression here. Exploration as a metaphor for human bravery and creativity. The frailty of nature and the impact of humankind and the environment, the mysteries of marriage and so forth. This volume will be released on April 4th for National Poetry Month. In 1964, Charles Portis left a promising career as a newspaper reporter in New York and London to return to his native Arkansas. There, working in relative obscurity, he would write the novels that led critic Ron Rosenbaum to call him the least known great writer in America. In 5 books published over 25 years, Portis refined a deadpan style in plots full of picaresque adventure, unforgettable characters, and rich humor. But it's for his second novel, 1968's True Grit, that Portis is most famous today. It has twice been adapted for the screen, the first time in the film that earned John Wayne an Oscar, and more recently by the Coen brothers in 2010. And in 2013, it was named the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read Library Selection. But all of his books are gems. Now, Library of America recognizes Portis's literary achievement with a landmark single volume collected works, bringing together all 5 novels along with his best stories and a generous selection of his journalism and essays. This is the ultimate desert isle edition for Portis's devoted fans, and will prompt a new round of appreciation for this quintessential American talent. If you're new to Portis, all I can say is you're in for a treat. And finally, I never want to underestimate a virtual room as well read as this one, but I'm guessing that for many of you, if you're like me at least, Nancy Hale may be the best 20th century short story writer you've never heard of. She won 10 O. Henry Awards, published 80 stories in the New Yorker over a career that spanned from the 30s to the 60s, and wrote a best-selling novel, The Prodigal Women, published in 1942, that scandalized a generation or two. We brought renewed attention to Hale's work in 2019 with Where the Light Falls, and this spring we'll be releasing both that collection and Hale's novel, The Prodigal Women, in deluxe new paperbacks featuring French flaps and new introductions by Lauren Groff and Kate Bollock. Thank you so much. To learn more about our books and our events and how to sign up for Story of the Week, please email me or visit loa.org. Thanks again.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Brian. And now we'll hear from Emily Powers. Emily is Senior Marketing Manager at Beacon Press, where she focuses on academic and library marketing. You can follow Emily on Twitter at Emily K. Powers. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, everybody. So just quickly before I begin, the books that I'm sharing today mostly all have galleys available on Edelweiss, except for a couple that we don't have yet. And you can email me with any questions you have. My email will be at the end of the presentation. So next slide. And before we get to the forthcoming books, I just wanted to share some really exciting news that our book Kindred is being turned into an FX series on Hulu. And so the series premieres December 13th, and it was developed for television by Brandon Jacobs Jenkins, who did Watchmen. It's also executive produced by Darren Arfonsky, and it has a great cast. So we're all really excited about that. We have a new gift edition out in honor of this, but if you haven't read Kindred yet, I imagine many of you have, but you really should. A woman suddenly vanishes on her 26th birthday from California in 1976 and is dragged through time to antebellum Maryland, where she soon realizes the purpose of her summons to the past is to protect an ancestor so that one day she can be born. But it's an amazing story. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that and say how excited we are, and I hope you all check it out. So next slide, please. So this is You Just Need to Lose Weight and 20 Other Myths About Fat People by Aubrey Gordon. So she equips readers with the facts and figures to reframe myths about fatness in order to dismantle the anti-fat bias ingrained in how we think about and treat fat people. Bringing her dozen years of community organizing, Gordon shares the approaches she employs not only to counter these pernicious myths, but to dismantle the anti-fat bias that so often underpins them. And so some of the examples of, these myths, like being fat is a choice, fat acceptance glorifies obesity, and things like that. And this comes out in January, I forgot to say, but next slide, please. And so Aubrey, if you aren't already familiar with her work, she's the co-host of the podcast Maintenance Phase, which debunks a lot of like health and wellness fads. And she's so fun and such an accessible writer and so funny to listen to or to read. This is her previous book with us, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. So I'm very excited about that one. So next slide, please. So this is The Patriarchs, The Origins of Inequality by Angela Saini, and this comes out February 2023. And so for centuries, societies have treated male domination as something natural to the human species, but that is not true. In this bold and radical book, award-winning science journalist Angela Saini explores the roots of what we call patriarchy, and she uncovers a complex history of how it first became embedded in societies and spread across the globe. She travels to the world's earliest known human settlements, has the latest research findings from science and archaeology, and traces cultural and political histories from all across the globe, from America to Asia. But it's a profoundly hopeful book, but most of all, it exposes male supremacy not as a foregone conclusion, but just as one ever-shifting element in systems of control across history. And so this is going to be perfect for fans of Sapiens, books like The Dawn of Everything, and politically progressive readers, science, people who are interested in science, feminists, etc. So next slide, please. So this is Momfluenced, inside the maddening, picture-perfect world of mommy influencer culture. This comes out in April 2023. So on Instagram, the private work of mothering has been turned into a public performance that's generating billions of dollars. And the message is very simple, that we're all a couple of clicks away from a beautiful, more perfect experience of motherhood. And so this book explores the performance of motherhood, both producers of it and consumers of it, through the very multi-layered phenomenon of the mommy influencer. And so it considers what it means to define motherhood for ourselves when society is determined to define motherhood for us. So I'm very excited about that one. I'm excited about all these books, but next slide. And then we have Butter, Novellas, Stories, and Fragments by Gail Jones, also in April. So this is a wide-ranging collection, including 2 novellas, 10 stories, and some really interesting fragments from the acclaimed author of Corregidora, The Healing, and Palmares. If you haven't heard of Gail Jones, she's having a huge moment right now. She's currently a finalist for the National Book Award in Fiction. So we're going to be going to New York next month for that award ceremony, which is very exciting. And then her last book, Palmares, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. So her work is really fantastic. And this book is great for readers of Ta-Nehisi Coates, Colson Whitehead, Toni Morrison. And it's a really beautiful package. So that that's Butter. So if we could go to the next slide. This is Narcas, the secret rise of women in Latin America's cartels. So you've heard of Pablo Escobar and El Chapo, but what about the drug ladies? Investigative reporter Deborah Bonello takes us behind the curtain to introduce the women at the helm of organized crime south of the US-Mexico border. These women are the powerhouses behind violent cartels, masterminds of extortion rackets. And for the first time, this book is really giving voice to women who are part of these drug trafficking monarchies and communities. And the author really chronicles the complexity of their actions and desires and sort of why these experiences are underreported. And how important it is to sort of understand women as fully capable beings who are all often ambitious, innovative, ruthless, as violent as their male counterparts. So next slide, please. And then last but not least, we have No Meat Required, the cultural history and culinary future of plant-based eating. So the vegan diet used to be associated only with eccentric hippies and people that lived on compounds, but now fine dining restaurants like 11 Madison Park cater to very upscale clients with a plant-based menu. Impossible Whoppers are available at Burger King. So Alicia Kennedy chronicles this fascinating history of plant-based eating in the United States. She is a vegetarian, former vegan, once proprietor of a vegan bakery, and she understands how to present this history with sympathy, knowledge, and humor. And it brings a lot of depth and context to our understanding of vegan and vegetarian cuisine and culture. And it makes, a passionate argument for retaining veganism's radical heart. Yes, thank you. I forgot to say next slide. But that is it from me. So if you want to just go to the next slide where my email is. So as I said, galleys are available on Edelweiss, or you can email me directly here if you have any questions at all about any of the books that I mentioned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Emily. Next, we have Tiffany Gonzalez, Marketing Manager at Astra House. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, thank you. So I'll jump right into it. Next slide, please. We Are a Haunting by Brooklyn native Tyreek White is a debut coming-of-age novel. It's a story about inheritance, full of hope and transformation, that follows 3 generations of a Black American family who share the gift of sight, the ability to see and speak to the dead passed down from their ancestors. We come to know young Kali, his mother Kay, and her mother Audrey through chapters written from their altering points of view. This is a story about the cost of building and maintaining a community set largely in East Brooklyn, a Brooklyn with rich prose and vivid imagery, a Spike Lee Brooklyn written with all the angst and alienation of the Southern Gothic tradition. White writes these characters with a deep sense of soul, just as he writes this place from a position firmly rooted in a culture that stems from the American South, the Caribbean, and all the way to the African continent. Publishing on April 25th, 2023, We Are a Haunting unravels the threads connecting the past, present, and future. A supernatural family saga rich with social critique and a lyrical and powerful account of displaced lives. Next slide, please. Next up is Rivermouth by Alejandra Oliva, is a nonfiction book about translation, storytelling, borders, and what we owe one another as neighbors, as understood through the United States immigration crisis. Alejandra's own story as a first-generation daughter of wealthy Mexican immigrants is a lens through which she presents class and race as tools used to divide people who might otherwise find points of community and collaboration. This book is a testament to the importance of a willingness to extend radical empathy to the other. Oliva focuses on the physical spaces that make up different phases of immigration and looks at how language and opportunity move through each of them. From the river as the waterway that separates the United States and Mexico, to the table as the place across which Oliva presents asylum seekers for their credible fear interviews, and finally to the wall as the imposition that runs along America's southern border. Publishing June 20, 2023, Rivermouth argues for a better world while telling us why it's worth fighting to get there. Next slide, please. YN by Esther Yi is a debut novel about a 29-year-old Korean-American woman living in Berlin, whose obsession with a K-pop idol of BTS magnitude named Moon sends her to Seoul on a journey of literary self-destruction. Painfully in love and with nowhere to put her new gigantic feelings, our bookish narrator begins writing YN fan fiction about her unattainable crush. YN fiction, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a point of view style of storytelling where you, the reader, insert your name as the protagonist so that you can live out your ultimate K-pop fantasy. When Moon suddenly retires, vanishing from the public eye, the narrator goes on a journey where fantasy and reality meet in clashing ways. Publishing on March 21st, 2023, YN is a literary adventure about fandom and contemporary longing that paints a picture of the loneliness that afflicts modern life. Next slide, please. Wild Dances by William Lee Adams is a memoir combining race, glitz, glamour, geopolitics, and the power of pop music. It's about how a misunderstood queer, biracial kid in small-town Georgia became a Eurovision Song Contest commentator. Raised by an undiagnosed bipolar Vietnamese mother and a deeply racist Army vet father, circumstances led Lee Adams to be his disabled older brother's primary caregiver, often entertaining him by performing wild dances to make him laugh. He found refuge in the only books available in the house, an outdated encyclopedia, and dreamt of leaving Atlanta to see the world. In time, he managed to get away, graduating from Harvard and then moving to London as a foreign correspondent. It is in London that Lee Adams first discovered Eurovision, and in that process, his chosen family that embraced him for exactly who he is. Publishing on May 9th, 2023, Wild Dances celebrates the power of pop music to help us heal and forgive. A small fun fact, Lee Adams appears as himself in the Will Ferrell 2020 Netflix film movie, The Story of Fire and Saga, interviewing the contestants very much as he does in real life. Next slide, please. I Went to See My Father by Ki Young-suk Shin and translated by award-winning translator Anton Her is a follow-up to the international bestseller Please Look After Mom. The story centers on a woman, Han, 2 years after losing her daughter in a tragic accident. Han returns home in the countryside to take care of her aging father with hopes of reconnecting. Consumed with her own grief, Han had been blind to her father's vulnerability and her father's fragility. Unraveling secrets after secrets, and thanks to conversations with loving family and friends, Han grows closer to her father, who proves to be more complex than she ever gave him credit for. Publishing on April 11, 2023, I Went to See My Father is a reminder that we must take an interest in our elders before their history is lost to us. Next slide, please. And finally, The People Who Report More Stress by National Book Award fiction finalist Alejandro Varela is a collection of interconnected stories packed with the anxieties of people who retreat into themselves while living in the margins, acutely aware of the stresses that modern life takes upon the body. In these humorous, sexy, and highly neurotic tales about parenting, long-term relationships, systemic and interpersonal racism, and class conflict, Varela expresses the frustrations of knowing the problems and solutions to our society's inequalities, but being unable to do anything about them. This collection, which is already generating lots of buzz, publishes on April 4th, 2023. Next and final slide. Thank you. If you want to look at our catalogs, the link is right there, and I believe it'll be circulating as well. Our email is also on the slide where you can email me for any questions, galley requests, and they're also available on Edelweiss and NetGalley. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Tiffany. Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Claire Kelly. Claire is Director of Library and Academic Marketing at 7 Stories Press. She is also working towards her MLIS degree at San Jose University. Thanks for being here, Claire.
Hi, everyone. And thank you so much. It's so exciting to present to you. And as I'm sure you all heard, we are the publisher of Annie or No, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature. So next slide. And so I just wanted to give you an update on where we are. We don't publish just one of Annie Ernaux's books. We published 12. And so they immediately sold out. You'll see in the next slide because, you know, of the demand. But we have all 12 coming this month, or the month of November, in these beautifully redesigned covers that all fit together and have those Nobel Prize stickers on them. So I will say, you know, for people who are new to Annie Ernaux, there's really no one place to start. These books are really an incredible mosaic of her life and her experience, but they really look nice together. So for any librarians who'd like to do displays, we have a digital display kit that we put together for booksellers, and I think they'll be really nice for library displays as well. While we're waiting for the print editions to be back in stock, which, like I said, we're looking about mid-November for them to be available. We do have ebooks available, and we're seeing really strong demand there. I'll remind you that 7 Stories offers 1 copy, 1 user licenses, perpetual license, which I know is popular at libraries. So please take advantage, and please feel free to reach out for me for that digital display kit, and I'll be sure to share a link so you can access that as well. And next slide, please. Getting Lost came out the week of the Nobel announcement. So it briefly hit the New York Times bestseller list before we went out of stock. So we expect to see continued demand, especially through the end of the year, when Annie Ernaux will give her Nobel acceptance speech on December 7th. So it's a good time to stock up and be ready for that. And so Annie Ernaux is one of the 7 founding authors that is part of the name of our publishing house, 7 Stories Press. And next slide, please. Octavia Butler is another founding author. So we publish her some of her books in hardcover. And next slide, please. We recently did redesigned editions of these 3 hardcovers: Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, and Fledgling. And next slide, we also publish Bloodchild, which is a collection of her short fiction and nonfiction. You may know that we published the paperback edition, and that's probably very popular with your patrons. We're coming out with this hardcover edition in December. So I think you'll want to, that's on the title list. So I think that'll be a really wonderful and beautiful edition for patrons. It's cover art by the same artist as those other 3, Paul Lewin. Next up, The Gospel of Orla is a book I'm really excited about. I'm sharing my little Edelweiss banner. It's a debut novel by Northern Irish poet Owen Walls, and it's a personal favorite. Like I said, I'm really excited. It's a coming of age story of a young girl, Orla, and the man she meets who has an astonishing and unique ability. Next slide, please. It's coming in March next year. So they travel across the north of England and have some mysterious and magical adventures that involve a cat named Sneaky and a circus elephant. And I won't give more away, but it's really funny. It's told in her voice, and it's really wise, and it's about religion, as the cover alludes to. So we're getting some really wonderful quotes and excitement. So for people who are into Fiona Mosley, Max Porter, Sheila Heti, Joy Williams, Nell Zink, and Emer McBride, this is one you'll really want to recommend in Reader's Advisory. I would say it's a YA crossover for sure. We're creating a reading group guide, and we're really hoping for some Library Reads nominations for this one. So the digital review copy is available on Edelweiss and NetGalley, and I would be very glad to send you a physical copy if you email me. So next up, I just wanted to point out the book on the right is new, coming out in the spring, and it's sort of a companion in some way to Voices of the People's History of the United States, which are testimonies to living history. This new one covers the 2000 to the present, and it's a comprehensive volume of documentation of activism, protest, and social change. So it features speeches, essays, songs, documents from Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, Indigenous struggles, environmental movement, disability justice. So it's a really wonderful book for library collections. And next up, I just want to make sure everyone knows about our Che Guevara library. So we published this list from Australian publisher Ocean Press. And so we're releasing Che Guevara's backlist, including Motorcycle Diaries, which is already out, in both English and Spanish editions. So for anyone who does collection development for literature in Spanish. I'd love to send you some of these. Feel free to write to me. But in collaboration with Vanderbilt University, we also created a bilingual curriculum guide for the whole series, and I include that link there. So check that out. And then I want to get to our children's list. We're celebrating, next slide. Oh, these are 2 new Che books. It's going to be it's our 10th anniversary this year of Triangle Square Books for Young Readers. And next slide, please. We created this folding poster catalog, and I would love to send it to any of your children's collection development librarians. It includes a note from our publishers about the philosophy behind the list. And of course, you all know Inosanto Nagara, who is the illustrator and author of A is for Activist. Next slide, please. And this is just a really nice snapshot of backlist picture books, middle grade and young adult books all the way through spring 2023. And next slide. It also gives a sense of some of the series. So Corey Silverberg just came out this year with You Know Sex. Corey's the author of graphic novel sex ed books that are inclusive of LGBTQ and disability experience. But then here it outlines also some new series. They Said No is Resistance Stories and Biographies, and our Young Philosophy series. So I'd love to send you this folding poster. Next slide shows it folds out into a big poster. There's 2 different versions. And if you fill out this request, you can choose which poster you want. Next slide. So the biggest books coming out in the spring, Media and Me is part of that for young people series that's in the poster. And 8 to 18-year-olds spend more than 11 hours with some form of online media. So Media and Me really gives them tools to learn about storytelling, building arguments, recognizing fallacies, all through a critical media literacy lens. And then also this year is the centennial of Zinn's birth, Howard Zinn's birth. So we're releasing a new edition of our best-selling Young People's History of the United States, which has been adapted for young readers, and it has new contributions by Latinx scholar Ed Morales and expanded coverage of Native American history and Asian American activism. Next slide. This is our Edelweiss page. So I will include a link to this page where you can see our Annie Ernaux collection, all 12 of her titles, and also request all of our digital review copies. And last slide, I think, just has my contact information. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Claire. That was so informative. Next up, we have Rachel Ferschleiser. Sorry, Rachel is VP, Associate Publisher, and Executive Director of Marketing at Catapult, Counterpoint, and Soft Skull Press. Previously, Rachel led marketing at Knopf, Pantheon, and Schoken Books, audience development at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, publisher outreach at Tumblr, community at Bookish, and public programs at Housing Works Bookstore Cafe. Rachel is the co-creator of 6-Word Memoirs and co-editor of the New York Times bestseller, Not Quite What I Was Planning. Welcome here, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't realize you guys were going to get my life story, but I'm very happy to be here with all of you. I'm Associate Publisher and Marketing Director at Catapult, Counterpoint, and Soft Skull Press. As you likely know, in addition to 3 incredible book imprints, we also have an online magazine and a really extensive writing class program. So we'd love to be involved with you and your communities in any number of ways. Our galleys are all available digitally on Edelweiss and NetGalley, or I can send you a physical copy. My email's at the end of this presentation. We would love to share all these books with you. I'll be honest with you, we do incredibly well with Indie Next, 2 or 3 titles a month, and not as well with Library Reads. So if you have advice or requests, we are here for anything that you need. The first book I'd like to tell you about is called The Islands. This is a story collection entirely about women in Jamaica or from Jamaica, immigrants or descendants of immigrants who've relocated all over the world to escape the ghosts of colonialism on what they call the island. Set in the United States, Jamaica, and Europe, these international stories examine the lives of uncertain and unsettled characters. I love a book that explores the interiority of different kinds of women, and these stories are so incredible. In one, the only Jamaican mother at a private school who's also a touring comedian feels pressure to volunteer at International Day. In one story, a travel writer connects with a mother who long ago abandoned her. The first story is about a couple who moves to Florida and finds their marriage and their whole sense of identity tested. This is one of these stories where I'm like, open up the book, read the first story. I don't need to do anything else. It's going to blow you away. I guarantee it. The next book I want to share with you is called How It Went. This is by Wendell Berry, who you probably know more for his poetry or his environmental activism, his refusal to use a computer. But this is his fiction. And it's really a beautiful entry into this world of Port William, Kentucky. Wendell Berry says it's taken a lifetime for him to learn to write like an old man. And that's what we have here. These stories are told with grace and ease and majesty. He's one of the greatest living American authors. And these 13 new works explore one small town from 1932 to 2021, spanning kind of a big swath of American history through these very vivid characters. I hope Wendell Berry fans and newcomers alike will check it out. Next up, The Survivalists by Kashana Cauley. This is coming from Soft Skull in January, and this is our big buzzy book for the year. I would recommend this book to anybody. It's funny, it's smart, it's super readable, it's serious and satirical at the same time. You might know Kashana from her 150,000 Twitter followers, from her writing on The Daily Show. She's written on a couple of other TV shows as well, and this book it is well written, but it also has a very visual perspective where you can sort of see how fast she keeps things moving. It's about these Brooklynite doomsday preppers and the Black woman lawyer who's drawn into their orbit and also their illegal activities. It's kind of an office novel. It's kind of dystopian. It's political and super, super readable. It's got blurbs from Percival Everett, Gary Steingart, Samantha Irby, Tom Perrotta, a really wide range of writers. Everyone's really excited about it. I'm going to read to you from the Starred Kirkus review that I think really captures it. Cauley's experience as a Manhattan antitrust lawyer infuses the office scenes with authentically cutthroat competition, and her comedy writing chops shine in hilariously succinct characterizations. But what really sets this debut novel apart is its finely tuned balance between extremes: humor and drama, conspiracy and reason, careful preparation, and total chaos. Funny and fresh, Cauley's prose moves dynamic characters through a vivid, living New York City. I should also tell you that Booklist also likes it. Incisive observation, logic, and dark humor delves into the perils of the thrill of the fringe and the limits of anyone's power to control their environment. Also coming in January, I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself. This is a really cool kind of literary sci-fi crossover. It starts, the kid is born with two shadows. You better believe that I head straight down to the Department of Balance office to appeal their decision. It isn't right giving an extra shadow to a baby. It's not like she killed you on purpose. She's a newborn baby, for fuck's sake. She's basically a more sophisticated potato. Department of Speculation meets Black Mirror in this lyrical, speculative debut about a queer mother raising her daughter in an unjust surveillance state. We have a gorgeous Booklist review for this one as well. Thought-provoking, compelling, relatable, brimming with hope, love, and spirit, a soft yet fierce narrative. I really encourage you to check this one out. The Chinese Groove by Catherine Ma, also coming up in January, is a really buoyant, big-hearted read. It's a kind of Ann Tyler meets Jade Chang, and it's about a blithely optimistic immigrant with big dreams, dire prospects, and a fractured and stunted family in need of his help. So he comes to San Francisco to claim his dreams, certain that everything is going to go right. Everything does not go right, but in a really fun to read kind of way. If you have patrons saying like, I don't want to be depressed, I want to escape from the world, they loved Less, or, you know, these kind of like big-hearted, feel-good novels, this is a really good one I would recommend to anyone. Brutes is a little less feel-good. If you love the Virgin Suicides, if you love the complex horror and symbolism of Shirley Jackson, or the way Laurie Moore captures adolescent girlhood, or if you love Yellow Jackets, you should check out Brutes. It is written by a British writer who grew up in Florida, so it has like some very different influences. We also call it hormone horror. It's really about girlhood in a way that is both nostalgic and terrifying. If you like Mary Gateskill, Sally Rooney, Lauren Groff, check this one out. Users is also a maybe not quite sci-fi, but genre readers will like it. It's kind of for fans of Severance. It's a workplace satire that's also about tech in a really terrifying way. We meet Miles, who's the lead of a virtual reality company, and the experiences his company creates have drawn huge controversy. He has little kids at home, he's getting death threats, and all these parts of his life kind of spin together in fascinating ways. Who Gets Believed is Dina Nayeri's book, follow-up to The Ungrateful Refugee, which I know a lot of you loved. This is sort of a bigger pop psychology kind of book. It's like a great big think piece about why we believe people, how we persuade people, who we don't believe and who we don't find convincing and why. It's really wide-ranging and serious, but fascinating to read for all of your nonfiction fans, like right up to the Malcolm Gladwell readers of the world. The Dig is a literary thriller. I think I'm running out of time. If you like the dry, if you like something that you pick up once and you can't sleep that night because you just can't stop. But it's also about these Sarajevo-born siblings who come to America. There's some serious backdrop and a current day mystery behind all of it. It's a debut by someone who's been writing for 30 years, and it really shows. It's so rich. I highly recommend it. The Human Origins of Beatrice Porter and Other Essential Ghosts is a novel, not a story collection, despite the title. For fans of Helen Oyeyemi, it's about sisters in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and it's a little bit magical and also very real. Incredible novel. Stay into it. I'm out of time. Thank you so, so much. That's my email address. Please do ask for any book you'd like to read.
Thank you so much, Rachel. We're all spellbound. It's hard to switch, right? But here we have Anne Rumberger. Anne is the U.S. Marketing Director at Verso Books. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks so much to Grace and Donna and everybody at Booklist. Verso Books was founded in 1970, and we primarily publish works of left politics. We launched our fiction imprint in 2019, so I'll be talking a little bit about some of our fiction titles coming up. And just wanted to note that one of our most cherished and important authors, Mike Davis, just passed away yesterday from cancer. His commitment to fighting for working people and his many books on history and politics will live on. His most well-known books are City of Courts and Planet of Slums, and his most recent book is on the political history of LA, Set the Night on Fire. So this is a really good chance to revisit some of Mike's absolutely incredible books and to recognize his life fighting for working class people. I'd love to talk a little bit about some of our fiction titles. Next slide. So some of these, these are some of our titles that you might be familiar with, some of our classics and best-selling books of all time. You can see Mike Davis's Planet of Slums up there. So our fiction titles, we launched our fiction imprint 4 years ago, and we've been doing really well with them. We publish primarily works of translation, though not entirely works of translation, majority women authors. We've translated books from Norwegian, from Japanese. We have some authors from South Africa and Canada, all over the place. These are some of the titles that we published in the last couple of years. Marlo Granados' Happy Hour is our best-selling fiction title of all time. It was reviewed in the New Yorker and the New York Times and NPR. We've sold about 20,000 copies since it came out last fall. It's a really wonderful, fun, buzzy, kind of summer read book. I Fear My Pain Interests You. Next slide, please. This one just came out last month by Stephanie LaCava. It's a very fun read that's been widely covered in the media, including a great New York Times book review, which said that it has controlled self-awareness. Which is a fun way of looking at this book about the daughter of rock star parents and kind of a coming of age story. And then Is Mother Dead? This is by Norwegian novelist Vigdis Hjorth, and this book just came out yesterday. It just got an incredible review in the New York Times Book Review, which said that Hjorth deftly conveys the psychological warfare of familial conflict in circuitous, searching sentences. It's a really beautiful book about the tensions between a mother and her daughter. And next slide, Hit Parade of Tears. This is the newest collection of stories. It comes out next April by the cult Japanese sci-fi author Izumi Suzuki. She was really active in the 70s, and we're publishing her stories in English for the first time with these two collections. So we published her first collection, Terminal Boredom, last spring. They were widely reviewed, including in the New York Times Book Review. And this collection features mostly women characters. They explore gender issues and class inequality. Many of them are very dark. There's often a sci-fi twist to them. And then our next novel, Crooked Plow, this comes out next June. This is the one all of us are the most excited about. This is one of the most important Brazilian novels of the last century, is kind of how we're pitching this. This book has been a bestseller in Brazil when it came out a couple of years ago. It's a really unique blend of magical realism and social realism. It's already won 3 big literary awards. It's being translated into about a dozen languages, and it's currently being adapted by HBO into a miniseries. It's a really fascinating story about the lives of subsistence farmers in one of Brazil's poorest regions, 3 generations after the abolition of slavery. And it covers themes of family and spirituality, the aftermath of slavery and political struggle. And there's a lot of magical realism elements there too. Next slide, please. Miss Major Speaks. This is coming out in January, and Miss Major is a veteran of the infamous Stonewall riots. She's a former sex worker and a transgender elder and activist, and here she is reflecting on a lifetime of struggle and the future of Black, queer, and trans liberation. And next. Key selling points about this book: she's such an iconic activist, and this is a great interview book with her. Next slide, please. Fighting in a World on Fire. This comes out in February of 2023. This is a YA adaptation of How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Andreas Malm's best-selling, widely reviewed, and urgent work on the need to end fossil fuel reliance and save the planet. It's adapted for middle school and high school students age 12 and up. Next slide, please. And this is a book for young climate activists who have been inspired by Greta Thunberg and by Fridays for Future. It's also for their parents and educators. It includes black and white images and a lot of breakout boxes with discussion questions and key takeaways. Next slide, please. And Set Fear on Fire. This is coming out in March of next year. This is a fiery feminist manifesto from the Chilean Performance Collective, who led the rallying cry for today's mass feminist movement across South America. Next slide, please. So this performance collective, their name is Las Dices. They were named by Time Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people of 2020. They've worked with Pussy Riot. And this is a manifesto that discusses femicide, abortion, homophobia, feminist art, and the oppression of the state. And they're arguing for a feminist world based on collective struggle and on visionary political art to help us build our fighting movements. Next slide, please. Working Girl. I'm so excited for this book. This is coming out next May, and it's a debut essayistic work combining personal memoir and cultural theory. It's a really provocative piece of creative nonfiction that ties the contemporary art world to the author's own experience as a sex worker and an artist trying to make a living. So the author argues that if we delve into our anxieties around art and around sex, we can find new ways to live and new spaces of freedom. And this is a book for readers of Emily Witt, Claire Dedener, and Melissa Phoebos. Next slide, please. The Palestine Laboratory. This is coming out in May of 2023. This is from award-winning journalist Anthony Lowenstein, and it's an explosive book of reporting on how Palestine has become the perfect laboratory for the Israeli military technical complex. So surveillance, home demolitions, indefinite incarcerations, and brutality to the high-tech tools that are driving this startup nation. So this is a book on how Israel has become a global leader in spying technology and defense hardware, and that industry is fueling the globe's most brutal conflicts. So this is a book for readers of Naomi Klein, Noam Chomsky, and Jeremy Scahill. Next slide, please. Architect Verb. This is coming out in February of 2023. This is an insider's guide to the politics of buildings that unpacks the terms and the trends in architecture, and it offers a critical take on design and buildings. So Rainier de Graaf is one of the leading architects in the world. And this book is very funny. He's like using humor and wit to debunk and criticize very popular terms of the trade. He's exposing the truth behind the language of the built environment and exploring the politics of building and design, especially highlighting the housing crisis and climate change. And last slide, Writers and Missionaries. This is coming out in May of 2023. This is a debut collection of essays by the celebrated essayist Adam Schatz. And in this collection, he's charting the role of the committed intellectual through the work of Jean-Paul Sartre on the Algerian War and Edward Said's lifelong solidarity with the Palestinian people, alongside philosophers and critics like Roland Barthes, Jacques Derrida, Claude Lévi-Strauss, and the novelists Michel Houellebecq and Richard Wright, each of whom struggled to reconcile their writing and their politics. And Adam Schatz is a very well-known and well-connected writer for the London Review of Books and the New Yorker, but this is his very first collection of essays. And that's all for me. Thank you so much, and feel free to reach out if you'd like any galleys.
Oh, that was great, and thank you so much. Next, we will hear from David Goldberg. David is Sales and Marketing Director at Steerforth Press. He also works closely with Archipelago Books and Pushkin Press. David is based in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood of Boston, where he and his two young readers are fixtures at the Connolly branch of the Boston Public Library, as well as their local indie bookseller, Paper Cuts. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm David Goldberg, so Sales and Marketing Director at Steerforth. And the full group of indie presses I work with include Steerforth, publisher of timely narrative nonfiction, Archipelago, the Brooklyn-based not-for-profit devoted to world literature and translation, and Pushkin Press with their wonderful literary fiction and nonfiction and crime fiction. DRCs of all these books are currently available on Edelweiss, and if you ask in the Q&A box, Taylor will provide my email address and a full Edelweiss collection. Our first book, Punishment of a Hunter, is the first in a 3-book noir series of historical mysteries set in Stalinist Russia in the 1930s. Perfect for fans of John Banville and Laura Prescott's The Secrets We Kept. The series has sold more than 60,000 copies in Russia. It has a very suspenseful and noirish literary style, and the author's deep knowledge fills the book with atmospheric and period-specific details that brings the Soviet setting to life, as well as more glamorous elements such as thoroughbred horses, missing jewels, and art. An English language TV deal has already been signed, and we will bring out the second book in fall 2023. Next, history buffs will be riveted by The Wolf Age, a gripping account of ruthless Vikings and political intrigue that reads like a real-life Game of Thrones without the dragons. With interest in Vikings at a high, this really exciting, well-paced popular history breathes new life into the Viking raids on the 11th century Anglo-Saxons with a modern sensibility that'll be perfect for fans of Dan Jones. It's also the first major book on Vikings by a Scandinavian author to be published in English. Everyone who's seen this book, including the printer, has fallen in love with it, and we're expecting a rave review soon from the Wall Street Journal. Next, Hotel Splendide, the long out-of-print title beloved by Anthony Bourdain. It's perfect for lovers of travel in New York City and grown-up fans of Bemelman's most famous work, Madeline. Publishing on the 60th anniversary of his death, this uproariously funny slice of life recounts his experiences working at New York's Ritz Hotel in the 1920s. His delightfully evocative and witty tales of grand hotel life bathes his world and its lovable characters in a very fairy tale mood. And this beautiful paperback with illustrations throughout will be followed in March 2023 by the next book to the one I love the best, which does for LA and classic Hollywood what Hotel Splendide does for New York. Here, Bemelmans recounts his friendship with a late-in-life, extraordinarily eccentric and very famous Elsie de Wolfe, who took Broadway by storm and is now considered a gay icon, but who's most famous for being considered the inventor of interior design. De Wolfe was also the first woman to tint her hair blue, was an early advocate for dieting and yoga, and her party trick was standing on her head. And one final note, the title, of course, refers to Elsie's dog, pictured with her on the stunning cover. Next, is Eastbound by Maylis de Caringal, which just received a star review in PW, which called it a triumphant achievement. Readers are in for a dazzling literary ride. Eastbound is a short, intense novel that references Russian classics while reviving the archetype of the rebel Russian soldier, giving it a very timeless feel that's awfully relevant right now. Both gripping and breathless, Eastbound takes place over 2 days on the Trans-Siberian Railroad, as a 17-year-old Russian military deserter hopes a chance encounter with an older Frenchwoman will offer him a line of flight. The stakes are high for the two fugitives, and the tense and dramatic set pieces reminded me of The Great Circle and Amor Towles' Lincoln Highway. Next, Jenny's Boy is the tender, joyful, and extremely funny memoir of a boyhood few thought young Wayne would survive, including his unforgettable mother and hilarious grandmother. Johnston is a national treasure in Canada, and this is a book to be relished by lovers of The Glass Castle, Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight, and Angela's Ashes. It's a gritty childhood memoir about tough lives and subjects, the working poor, family strife, and mysterious illnesses, that it's all told from a child's perspective. So it's never a downer, and it's suffused with joy, humor, and a profound love on each page, ending with a warm and uplifting outcome. Johnston perfectly captures the spirit of his mother, Jenny, and his grandmother, Lucy, two strong women who kept Wayne's body and soul together and somehow kept him laughing through it all. Next, A Silence Shared is a beautiful Italian cult classic from the 1950s, which Pushkin is publishing in English for the first time. Jhumpa Lahiri is already a fan, and this translation has great potential for discovery, with so much interest in female Italian writers from this period. The story of two partisan couples hiding in an Italian mountain village during the German preoccupation is a short, powerful, and evocative piece that hums with a slow burn. A long and difficult winter of occupation provides this charged and intense pod with an intellectual liberation reminiscent of Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, while the actual liberation that arrives at the end of the book returns everyone back to their own private confinements. Next, OCME, Life in America's Top Forensic Medical Center, is perfect for fans of David Simon. It also reminded me of Michael Lewis. It's an unvarnished, behind-the-scenes look inside the nation's preeminent office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Baltimore, Maryland, where good people fight the good fight amidst the tragedies and absurdities of our age and lose. Now, Goldfarb spent a decade at the OCME, giving him unprecedented access not only to numerous national stories, including the Freddie Gray case, but the broader context that's missing from true crime and police procedurals, how mounting deaths from opioids and homicides have run up against a shortage of experts, budget cuts, political demagogues, and public ignorance about the crucial roles the OCME plays in the justice and public health systems. Next, Dinner Party, a debut novel by the Irish Times journalist and critic Sarah Gilmartin, is a remarkable Irish family saga from a blazing new talent about the messiness of modern life, as a family falls apart and sticks together. It's perfect for fans of Anne Enright, Kate Atkinson, and Maggie O'Farrell. Using the framing device of a family dinner party taking place on the anniversary of his sister's death, Gilmartin offers a bold and well-told take of family dynamics, moving backwards and forwards in a seamless yet unexpected manner in which the facts are carefully revealed. We see huge potential for this deliciously dark look at the events that shape us and the people who make us who they are. Next, Goodbye to Clocks Ticking is an emotional and uplifting journey of truly seeing and appreciating all that life has to offer in the year following a terminal diagnosis. Like the best travel writing, this is the story of an unexpected journey, but it's ultimately a joyful story about life, love, living, and the act of appreciating. Now, Joe's name may ring a bell because he's written a lot of books, including award-winning YA, romance, and nonfiction. He received his diagnosis as he was preparing for retirement, just 3 days after teaching his last class. He was told to expect 3, maybe 4 months, before his doctors realized that Joe was a genetic match for something of a miracle drug that could slow the cancer and extend his life. There was no telling for how long, though, so Joe returned to his writing desk, and the book tells the story of the first year of his journey, ending with his bucket list trip to witness the sandhill crane migration in Nebraska. Goodbye to Clocks Ticking is a book that inspires engagement, reflection, and a reordering of priorities for all of us as it ponders how to live while we're dying. It's the kind of writing that inspires people like us to work with books in the first place. And I want to let everyone know that Joe is doing well after a recent bout of COVID and looks forward to celebrating the book's March release. Finally, The Mill House Murders by Yakitu Ayatsuji is the eagerly awaited follow-up to Pushkin Vertigo's Decagon House Murders, which received a rave in the New York Times and was called one of the best 15 mysteries of all time by Book Riot. And we expect readers to fall victim again for this modern classic Japanese puzzle mystery translated into English for the first time. I want to thank everyone. We couldn't do what we do without all of you. And again, DRCs of all of these books are available on Edelweiss. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. Wow. Our final presenter is Janet Joy Wilson, Vice President of Sales at Melville House. Thank you, Janet Joy.
Hello, thank you everyone for staying. Before I start with the new books, I want to showcase our 20 best-selling backlist titles from over 20 years of publishing that are in print and in stock. Our first book was Poetry After 9/11 and was published on September 1st, 2002. 700 books later, we're still here. And these 20 top sellers are a must-have in your collection. And now on to 2023. The Dead Are Gods. After an unexpected phone call on an early morning in 2018, writer and model Irene Carson learned of her best friend Larissa's death. In the wake of her shock, Irene attempts to make sense of her best friend's death and what the events leading up to her death, and in the process uncovers startling secrets about her life in the process. This is a major contribution to the literature of trauma and grief, alongside the Year of Living of Magical Thinking. But this is not a book about the prescribed stages of grief. It's an intimate portrait of two women united by their love of music and books, who are always broke, sharing fleeting moments of joy, splendor, and heartache, and whose adventures as models take them to London, Paris, New York, and Los Angeles. Irene is a member of the San Francisco Writers Grotto and writes about motherhood, grief, and relationships. This memoir is her first book. The digital advanced reading copy will be available soon. Hanging Out. Starting with the assumption that play is to children as hanging out is to adults, Sheila Liming makes a brilliant case for the necessity of unstructured time as a key element of our cultural identity. The book asks questions like, what is hanging out? Why is it important? Why do we do it? And how do we do it? And examines the various ways we hang out in groups, online, at parties, and at work. It's a smart and empowering book about the simple act of hanging out and taking back our social life. I really like the final chapter, which is called How to Hang Out, with 5 very simple cues. Sheila, she's a pretty cool person. She's an associate professor at Champlain College in Vermont, where she teaches classes on literature, media, and writing. She's the author of 2 books along with being a musician. Her instruments, the accordion, and bagpipes. The digital arc is available. Jamie McGillivray. Spanning 13 years, 2 continents, several wars, and many smoke-filled and bloody battlefields, John Sayles' thrilling historical and cinematic epic invites comparisons to Diana Gabaldon, George R.R. Martin, and Charles Dickens. It's a big book. 702 pages of action sequences underpinned by meticulous research, which will appeal to both the discerning historical fiction reader and the action adventure enthusiast. John is an American independent film director, screenwriter, author, and actor. He has twice been nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, has written 7 novels, the latest being A Moment in the Sun. Digital arcs are available. Slime. In this fascinating, groundbreaking book, Susan Wedlick leads us on a scientific journey through the 3 billion year history of slime, from the part it played in the evolution of life on this planet to the way it might feature in a post-human future. She also explores the cultural and emotional significance of slime, from its starring role in the horror genre to its subtle influence on Art Nouveau. Chapter headers include quotes from SpongeBob SquarePants to Olivia Butler. She takes delight in the ooze, revels in the squidge, and brings it together in an admirably well-organized form to create a rollicking read. Suzanne studied biology and political science in Munich and has worked as a writer in Boston and Singapore. She's a freelance science journalist, and the digital arc is available. Flux. This is a provocative, dazzling, propulsive, time-bending, genre-twisting, and surreal literary debut about the evolution of identity in the way we lose ourselves to trauma and time. At its core, Flux contains a heart-wrenching exploration of father-son relationship and the grief that comes from losing a wife and mother at a young age. The novel delivers a sophisticated and moving exploration of Asian American identity in the shadow of a dominant white society. Yesterday, Flux got a PW starred review. It said, Chong writes with such subtlety and skill that readers won't realize the true nature of the speculative mystery at play until they're already waist deep in these interlocking narratives. Jinu Chong received an MFA from Columbia University. His short stories have appeared in the Southern Review and Chicago Quarterly Review, and Flux is his first novel. Read The Galley and see why the excitement is building. War by Other Means. Daniel Axe writes effectively of 4 key pacifists and objectors, noting that many of them took important roles later in resistance against war and for advances in civil rights. It's a fresh exploration of a little-known episode in the history of the American involvement in World War II. Daniel's work has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, and other leading publications. The digital arc is available. And My Fourth Time We Drowned. Sally Hayden's book shines a light on the resilience of humans, how refugees and migrants locked up for years fall in love, support each other through the hardest times, and carry out small acts of resistance in order to survive in a system that wants them to be silent and disappear. The On Post Irish Book Awards just announced their shortlist, and Sally is on both Newcomer of the Year and Nonfiction Book of the Year. With all of Sally's awards and continuing nominations, we are bringing out this very important book in paperback. As the Financial Times wrote, My Fourth Time We Drowned is journalist of the most urgent kind. Finally, Melville House's talent for successfully publishing undiscovered writers, its spirit of independence and nimbleness with crash publishing, a strong point of view, and our determination to last 20 years. And we will with book lovers like you. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Janet Joy. Thank you, everyone. What fantastic presentations. I'm so inspired. And tomorrow, all attendees out there will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, the title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can find archives of past programs and register for upcoming ones, like those that you see here. Have you heard about Booklist Reader? We love our new magazine. It offers reading recommendations to patrons of all ages. It's coming to print this January. Go to Booklist Reader in print at bit.ly to find out how you can order print copies in bulk to give away at your library. Already have a Booklist subscription? You can share the latest issue now. Go to our website for more details. Thank you for joining us for today's Big Reads from Small Presses webinar. So many exciting titles. One more huge thank you to all our panelists from all these exceptional presses and to our wonderful sponsor, Penguin Random House Library Marketing. This concludes today's webinars. See you next time. Stay well, everyone.